Donovan Mitchell and the New York Knicks just need to get this over with already. Plus, real or fake, Kevin Durant is hurting his legacy. And the NBA wants you to get out and vote. It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On NBA. Let's go.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Wednesday episode of Locked On NBA, the daily podcast covering everything you want to know about the association, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On Wednesdays, I'm your co-host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
And I'm John Karalis, at John_Karalis on Twitter, and I host the Locked On Celtics podcast.
And thank you for making a Locked On NBA your first listen today and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, plus right here on YouTube. And we're 5 days a week. Again, completely free, even in the middle of August. People are taking time off because there's not a whole lot to talk about. We're not. We got the content you want, right, John? Excellent show coming up.
Everything. You know what people aren't talking about? Kevin Durant.
Not at all. We got to fill the void.
You'd think that something this big would get a lot more discussion across the airwaves and pod waves.
That works. I like that.
Sure, but the people demand more Kevin Durant. Actually,
I know everyone is like over it, but we do have to talk about it today. But we're going to do it a little bit differently. The best was let me see if I can find the tweet. This one listener tweeted at you and I today that was like, "Hey, can you guys not talk about Kevin Durant today, please? Because the past like bunch of Locked On NBAs have done this. It's PMC86. I'll give him a shout out since he said this. And my first text to John this morning was like, so what about Kevin Durant are we going to talk about today?
Yeah.
We'll get into that in the second segment because everyone needs a break. But we should probably lead with Donovan Mitchell and the New York Knicks, because while we're still waiting on resolution with Kevin Durant, we're also waiting on resolution with Donovan Mitchell, because there's no reason the Utah Jazz should keep him, and they very much signaled that they are kind of moving on from him with this and the trade of Rudy Gobert. So after no talks happening for a little bit, it sounds like the Knicks and the Jazz have re-engaged in trade talks, according to Shams and The Athletic. John, tell me if you agree or disagree. Because I see this one way, right? This is like when you're watching a movie or like a rom-com or like something like that, and it's very obvious like two people should get together, right? Like it's like Pam and Jim in The Office or something like this, and you've got this stupid slow build up, and you're just in the movie theater screaming like "kiss" already, like "kiss her, man," something along those lines, right? Like. That's how I see the Knicks and Donovan Mitchell. Like, these two need to just kiss and just move in and get engaged already. And there's no reason to drag this out. Like, this is one of those trades that just makes so much sense to me.
I feel like I want to scratch the thing. Is that Jake or is that Danny Ainge over here on my feet?
Yeah,
Danny
right.
Ainge be saying the same thing. Like, hey, yeah, New York, you guys, come on. You got to just do this already. What are you dragging your feet? Because I was on Locked On Knicks last week talking about Danny Ainge and the Donovan Mitchell situation. And one of the things I said was Danny is not one to just do things for the sake of doing things. He's not gonna give in when he knows he has the desirable piece, right? We've seen the joke about Danny Ainge was here are all the trades that Danny Ainge didn't make. And it
almost
was
made.
Right.
Almost made.
Here are all the almost trades that he made. And, I always thought it was a little bit unfair, but like, I also do understand that Danny Ainge is very kind of particular. He doesn't want to just win the trade. He wants that absolutely, like he did with Minnesota, dominate the trade. He doesn't want to win games. He wants to win by 30. And I think that's what he's holding out for. And the Knicks are just kind of like, do we have to? Because you're going to end up bidding against yourselves. But at the same time, you still want Donovan Mitchell. Everybody kind of anticipates that that's going to be the landing spot. And so there's got to be a little bit of middle ground. I think that Danny just kind of needs to understand that Minnesota was in such a unique place that you can't anticipate the Knicks are going to give up. Well, if you gave up that, if we got this much for Gobert, you guys are going to have to give us, your entire future and like half the concessions from MSG and box seats to the Rangers. Like you can't expect all of that stuff. I think Danny needs to recalibrate his expectations a little bit as well.
You lived in New York for a while. Like, what's the most New York thing you would be willing to include in a trade for Donovan Mitchell here that New York can't have any more of? Putting you really on the spot there.
No, like a functioning MTA, a functioning subway system that actually is there on time with no delays. If they could actually get that, then you put that in. The most New York thing to trade out to Utah. I mean, Utah. What does Utah?
Yeah, I guess what do they want from New York?
Well, you couldn't have two more opposite cities than Salt Lake and Manhattan, where MSG is. Like that's relatively walking distance from Times Square, and like that's as opposite as you can get from anything Utah. Utah is very picturesque, scenic. New York is like using half the world's electricity. So it's like New York and Vegas, and like that's like 80% of the electricity used in the world. I can't think of what's the more like pizza.
Good
pizza?
Yeah, they probably would love that.
Utah has good pizza. I cannot imagine that Utah has good pizza. You know what? It's actually one of the cities I've actually never covered a game in Utah.
You're just scared of the boss.
Yeah. No. So here's the thing. When I was working at Mass Live covering the Celtics, I had another reporter, Tom Westerholm, for the people who know him from the Lockdown Celtics podcast. We were co-workers. He loves Utah. He loves the woods. He loves that stuff. And so he will always claim Utah. I'm like, great. I will always claim New Orleans because I just want to like have fun and party and go nuts. So I took New Orleans. I took all the New York trips. I took all of that stuff. So yeah, so he always took the scenic kind of outdoorsy stuff. But and that's why, like, so that aesthetic, New York, this couldn't have more opposite kind of things happening here.
That's probably kind of why here, watch me be a pro at this. It's probably kind of why like Donovan Mitchell wants out to a certain degree, right? Like we've heard rumors about him wanting out for such a long time, and that team's been really good. They haven't had a postseason run like you would like, but they've been really good, and there's no reason he should want to leave that franchise if you're going almost just purely based on like basketball results, and yet he still kind of does, also with tons of ties to New York and all of that too. But it probably factors into it. That's why, given everything, like favored son of New York, like he should probably be playing for the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. It's like destiny, just like Kiss, man. It's like the most recent Star Wars movie that was terrible. Kylo Ren and Rey, they just like needed to kiss, and you just got to get that out of the way. And it's like so much buildup leading to it.
Why do you got to do that to me? Totally derail me with. Like, I'm a big Star Wars guy, and you have to like. I was so excited for those movies, and then they happened, and so many people like I don't know. Anyway, yes, but I'm sure Danny Ainge probably wants a better result than the end result of those movies, which were terrible.
Yeah,
you don't want to come out of it. You don't want to come out of that kiss and the ending of that movie being like that was unfulfilling. That shouldn't have happened. Danny Ainge doesn't want to come out of this trade feeling that shouldn't have happened. And the thing about Danny is, he's probably tanking the same reason everybody else is tanking for this big monster draft and these big, all of these guys that could be game changers. And sure, that's part of it, but also like the picks, he's trying to get as many picks as possible because he will pursue the star. He will try to flip those. And he's just waiting. He's waiting for, you're trading away a star. He wants to get somebody later on. He wants to be that on the opposite side of this. So there's a reason why he's holding out. And also, hey, look, he doesn't have to trade Donovan Mitchell. Donovan can want out all he wants. It's very Durant-ish. It's very Durant adjacent in that you've got time on the contract. You don't have to do this now, that you can hold out for a better deal. Yes, New York and Donovan, They need to get together.
They have the assets though. Like they have the extra picks. You know, they have players that work salary wise. Like if you're gonna tank, throw Julius Randle out there and just let him go like ham for a season on a bad team.
You know, the problem. Actually, you know, be honest with you, the problem is that I think they have Will Hardy, who's a very highly respected guy who's been on the bubble, on the edge of getting a head coaching job for a while. This stint that he had in Boston alongside Ime Udoka was like the final. All right, now we got to start poaching these guys. I have high hopes for him. I don't think Danny Ainge wants to give him any pseudo good players, even if it is Julius Randle and Super Rice. I feel like Will Hardy, you can't give the scientist too many chemicals to work with because he's going to come up with something. You know what I mean? So I think Danny wants to I don't think he wants Julius Randle. And if he gets him, he's going to flip him.
Does anyone want him right now? Do the Knicks even want Julius Randle right now?
What happened? He was just like all NBA 2 years ago.
Second team All NBA, right? Yeah, he was so good. Tibbs won Coach of the Year because he got Julius Randle to play defense. And then whatever happened last season.
They traded for Kemba and Evan Fournier, and the whole thing went down the toilet. They went away from what worked. And look, the rising tide rises. All ships rise. And then when the tide goes out, all ships sink. So
it's wild. Like the fall from grace there. Yeah. Oh, man. Go listen to the Locked On Knicks podcast. It's probably a really, really fun time, especially if they end up getting Donovan Mitchell. All right, coming up next. Yeah, we got to do a little bit of Kevin Durant talk, but let's look at his legacy and how this trade demand is affecting it or not. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA. Before we get to that, though, think about it. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks, and then a few becomes too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. But nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds that you're going to get pulled over anyway, right? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? I don't know, your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of drunk driving. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. And that's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe, plan ahead, and get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. So drive sober or get pulled over. And thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all. Even in the offseason, we take no breaks because this is the most fun league in the world and we get to cover it. And there's fun stories, including the never-ending one that is Kevin Durant right now. I know you're probably going to go on a rant in a minute here, John, but I'm just going to throw it out. Wednesday, real or fake? Do you think this is real or fake? This is impacting Kevin Durant's legacy in the NBA.
I think Kevin Durant's legacy has been affected by his. I'm trying to find the right way to word this. I think his attitude has changed over the course of time. I feel like he's a relatively sensitive guy. I don't think I'm not speaking out of turn here.
No, you're not.
He's anybody who takes this much time to respond to so many people on Twitter. When you're Kevin Durant, when you're as good as Kevin Durant, there's a level of sensitivity involved there. I think that is what has served him the worst in all of this, because he went from, follows that path of you build somebody up and then you tear him down. And this is the tearing down process. This is just the latest kind of example of the, sensitive kind of, it's real. I mean, it's definitely real. It's a look behind the curtain a little bit with Durant and his thought process, but the more he reacts to all of these things and the less he just kind of says, I'm going to go play basketball, the more that legacy kind of erodes, the more people start to think like, oh God, great player, but I don't like that attitude or something.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you got real close to a point I want to make. So I definitely think this is real and kind of impacting his legacy. And look, he's got 2 NBA titles, right? MVP. He was the Finals MVP twice. Like, he's as good as they come in terms of being a player on the court. But you said something, right, where like this is very real and like honest, and you almost rarely see this kind of honesty from players and kind of like almost vulnerability from these players. Like he as you said, he's very sensitive, right? He cannot say he doesn't care what people think about him, and he very clearly does, and that's fine because we all do, and that's again super real, brutally honest. But when you kind of look at like all-time greats, right, you kind of want them to feel, you want them to almost feel infallible, right? Like they were bigger than life and larger than life and all sorts of things like that. And with him caring so much about what other people think, it seems to almost kind of make him too real, that he doesn't feel like a god out there or something like that, because gods wouldn't care about this sort of thing. And I think that does impact his legacy to a certain degree. And I think people kind of look at that and are like, all right, screw this guy. Like, as you said, right? People look at it and it's like, this guy again. And that's what it kind of seems to be coming up on, at least for me. And I think what a general feeling. That's why people don't want to hear about him anymore too, probably.
Yeah. Look, here's why I'm struggling. Here's why I struggle, because I believe in player agency, and I believe in these guys having this, the forum and using the forum and being real. And what I don't like is when somebody shows who they are, like, and it just happens to be like he's sensitive and he takes some things personally, and he doesn't like the perception around him. And I don't like when that tears a player down. And it's hard because I feel the urge to be like, just shut up, right? Like you want your athletes to act a certain way, but at the same time that runs counter to what I believe. So I have like this knee-jerk reaction of like, geez, Kev, please just relax a little bit. Like, this retirement stuff was Mark, like this one, honestly, Jake, you know this, but this bothered me because Mark Stein wasn't reporting that he would retire. He was using the conversation that he had with an executive, that the executive, like we said last week, the executive said, I think he'd rather retire before he goes back to the Nets. And using that as the springboard into the story of Durant being so dead set against going back, that we're at this impasse. He didn't report Kevin Durant might retire. He never put it in the headline. He never tweeted and put it out there. He used it as a mechanism that all writers do to get into what the story really was. And you can say, well, he shouldn't have done that because he knows that aggregators will latch onto things, and that's true. But also, it's on us to be like, not looking for one little morsel. It feels like everybody on the internet's like prospectors, like, looking for that little nugget. Like, they dip into the whole story and they shake, not even caring a damn about context. And they go, oh, this executive thinks that Kevin Durant might retire. Headline, boom. Here's my take, boom. SEO, boom, because all we care about is clicks, and that fires off the ads and all of that stuff. And now it gets out there, and now Kevin Durant's got to be like, oh, you got to believe the unnamed sources. Kevin Durant doesn't even have the context anymore. And I feel worse for like Mark Stein, because he's like, I didn't want this to be the thing. That's not what I was doing here. So I do think that Kevin Durant's image persona, from squeaky clean guy in OKC to kind of more kind of curmudgeon, basketball curmudgeon.
That's a good way to put it.
It's people still want him to be squeaky clean guy. And I don't care that he says what he says. But also, he does have to understand that there is like an inherent knee-jerk reaction that within people to be like, oh, Kev, you don't have to respond to everything. Like
yeah.
just
And
don't tweet.
it's like this should be just like a hard and fast
Right?
rule for like most people.
That's like the lesson for most people. Is like sometimes you just gotta, and it's
Don't
hard.
tweet through it, right?
It's hard for me. I'm sure you've had this whole thing too. Like, just sometimes you want to respond to people. And I'm like, and I'll have like a quote tweet ready, and I'll be like, you know what?
Yeah, it's fun to dunk on people on certain things, especially when they're like dicks and they've lied about you. Like that happens. Like someone's like, Jake said this, and it's like, great, now I got to go out there and correct this, because sometimes, like, especially on the writer side, it can get back to players, right? Or and Durant's a good example of this, right? Like, he just kind of picked up what was like out there in the ether being said about him and didn't trace it back to like what actually was said, right? So now he's out there being like, I never said this, and no one said that he said this, right? Like, as you said, that's not what it was, but people kind of took it and spun it like that. So I've had, we saw this with like Zion the other day at his contract extension thing, where he didn't say it about me, but said it to a guy I was sitting next to, Christian Clark of the New Orleans Advocate. And it was like, oh, are you the piano guy? And it's like, wait, crap. They see some of this stuff, and then it can create bad relationships. And so that stuff like matters, and you've got to kind of factor that stuff into everything. And it's just a bit of a mess. But keeping it back to Durant, because we could get derailed here very easily.
Yeah.
Do you think part of this has to do with like almost how unusual the request is to a certain degree, right? Where he's got 4 years left on the deal, 3 years left. And like, look, it's one thing when we see this when they got 1 year left, right? Or 1 year plus a player option. So it essentially makes it 1 year remaining. That's when you usually see this. That's when the players kind of have the sorts of leverage where it's like, oh, he's just going to bolt in a season and you're going to get nothing in return. This one's so weird of like, he kind of built this team, wanted all of this stuff, and now he's like, I hate all of this stuff and I don't want to be here at all anymore. And it's like, there's something to be said for like honoring the contract, even though, again, I also believe in like player agency and like, you're allowed to not like where you work and want to change jobs essentially, and it's not the easiest thing for NBA players to do because they can't just straight up quit like we could.
Right. I think the issue, yes, to answer your question directly, yes, the way everything has gone down, this is in a lot of ways, I think, worse than joining the Golden State Warriors. I had no problem when he joined the Golden State Warriors. A lot of people
I never got the hate on that one.
Yeah, but a lot of people, I kind of get it's just a fan driven narrative, whatever. Fine. I'm not going to relitigate that. I think this is worse in a lot of ways, in just about every way, because you just signed the 4-year extension. You didn't even put a player option in there, right? You didn't. He all signs pointed to him believing in the coach and believing in the general manager. And then last season happened, and I don't know how much of it. I mean, you can certainly say some of it was the coach's fault, but he never really had a full chance. He never had the chance. It was you ever seen the Seinfeld episode where the car gets BO and the BO kind of just sticks to everything, sticks to Elaine's hair? That's the Kyrie, like the Kyrie stink.
It's like the Nets right now.
Yeah, like that is permeating everything. All of the Kyrie kind of shenanigans, sitting out most of the year, then coming back, and the team kind of flip-flopping their stance there. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the thing that pissed Kevin off. Maybe Kevin secretly wanted them to stay kind of resolute on Kyrie, but the COVID thing happened, and they just ran out of bodies. Maybe if COVID didn't happen, or maybe if they didn't have the outbreak, and even if Kyrie missed the whole year and they stuck to their guns, maybe that would have changed things. I don't know. But the nature of this request has certainly tarnished a lot about what Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant was always supposed to be like the pristine guy, and you had LeBron as the hated guy, but LeBron kept still getting all the shine, and now Kevin Durant is the hated guy, and I don't think he became the hated guy when he went to Golden State, and I just don't think he ever responded to that well. He likes being liked, and he might say he doesn't care, but he once he became the villain, he never could handle that. He really never could handle being the villain. And I think he probably feels misunderstood and all that other stuff. It's just all of it's come together, and it's complicated, but it is off-putting.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I think we both agree it's real that it impacts his legacy. Let us know what you think. Real or fake? Is this impacting Kevin Durant's legacy? You can let us know in the comments down below on YouTube. So coming up, we're going to switch gears. The NBA schedule being released today at 3 p.m. Eastern. We're going to get into that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA and what the NBA is doing on Election Day. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. So find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. So BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, whether you want live in-game betting scores. They got podcasts too. You want to get in on the futures on where Kevin Durant might end up on his next team that wouldn't be the Nets. You can do it over at betonline.net. So head over to betonline.net today. You can also use your mobile device to get there to learn more about the action happening. Betonline.net, betonline, where the game starts. And thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen today and every day. We're here completely free Monday through Friday for you. Haven't missed an episode, even deep into the offseason. But we're getting some real NBA news. We got the schedule release coming up today at 3 p.m. Eastern. We've gotten bits and parts of it, and we'll get into that too. I have a problem with also how they're leaking so much about it. But the NBA also has a new initiative this year, which I think is pretty cool. The NBA is going to be playing 0 games on Election Day, November 8th. No teams have games scheduled that day, but all 30 teams are playing on November 7th, the night before the midterm elections, to get out there and share election information. They want you to know how to register. They want you to know where your polling place is, everything like that. They're trying to kind of use the day before to kind of raise awareness for this. John, I think this is a good middle ground for the NBA. You know, it's a league that, especially as we learned in the bubble, tends to be more activist than others, I think, and probably rightfully so, kind of given the makeup of the league. But they also, I think, struggle with it, and you can see Adam Silver doesn't necessarily love it at times, but I think this is kind of a way for them to strike that middle ground, right? Like, everyone believes in saying, go out and vote and make your voice heard, whatever it is you might be voting for. The NBA might skew much more left than, you know, anywhere else, but it's kind of a good middle ground that maybe is kind of hard to criticize the league on. Have they kind of like found the like secret sauce here, the right way to kind of almost like split the difference in a sense?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's split the difference. I think it's more.
It's not the right word choice. Yeah,
I think the league plays both sides, because it's a league where they want to make money, and obviously it's a business first. Their activism stems from the players and things that I think they took strong stances because obviously they believe in the messaging that's out there, but I think they also took some strong stances because the players were taking strong stances, and some of that threatened to derail some of the games. So the league needed to be as resolute as the players were, and so they took hardline stances. You didn't see them take as hardline a stance when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and so they didn't step into that political landmine. They've stepped into the gay rights, and they have some causes where they are all in. Some causes they don't want to touch. This is certainly a way for them to kind of continue with the player activism, the player messaging, and to continue to keep the players happy when it comes to making sure that minority, and this is all great. Like what's happening is all great. Minority communities are often left behind when it comes to voting, and they are doing what they need to do as far as using their platform to get the messaging out And then on election day, I hope the teams take it upon themselves to go out into the community and use some of their resources to get people to the polls and make sure voices are heard. Get together with their cities, their home cities, and kind of make sure that there's some follow through on this. The league has to do this. The league has to kind of make sure that the players are happy when it comes to this stuff. I'm not gonna lie, Jake. There's a collective bargaining agreement coming up. They gotta make the players happy in as many ways as they can to be able to walk into those negotiations and say, hey, look, we're not being adversarial. We got differences of opinion on the numbers. Let's try to work those out. That's probably not the main thing, but of the entire 100% pie, you can bet no matter what anybody says, there's a sliver of that says we're catering to the players to make sure that they understand that we are not being adversarial.
No, that's a really good point, right? Right. It goes back to the Jordan thing, right? Why he never kind of got political and got into things, right? It's the Republicans buy sneakers too. And the league probably, as you said, right, it's a business. They want to make money. They can't or don't want to fully alienate a sizable chunk of what their audience could be. And look, I get that part, but as you said, right, the players definitely feel one way, and these are causes they care about. So you have to cater to that to a certain degree. And so how do you find the middle ground on all of that? And I think this is definitely it, right? Like, you can't go to look at the league and criticize them for what they're doing here, right? Even if you're much more to the right and you know that they're kind of encouraging people to vote left, let's say, when it's kind of as generic as get out and vote and we're going to make sure there's no conflict on election day. They put themselves in a spot where they're kind of doing what they want and kind of immune to, I think, a lot of the criticism that's coming their way, which is probably for them exactly what they want. And it's, as we've said, again, it's immune to criticism because it's a good thing, right? And you mentioned them kind of getting involved with their cities. We've seen a lot of the arenas be used as polling places in the past, and not having games on election night frees that up to be the case again, to make these more accessible, because we've heard that debate, and without getting into all of that. So I think it's only a good thing for the league. To switch gears, though, I don't like how the league is doing the rollout of the schedule these past couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the league. I don't think the league is the one that's. I don't think.
Yeah, probably not.
I don't think the NBA is saying, okay, here's these drips and drabs. Let's show this to Shams. I think the league says to teams, like, teams have to start. We're doing this on this is the August 17th episode. Teams are going to start traveling in 2 months. I think the people who organize that travel have to be like, hey, give me
you got book hotels and stuff. Yeah.
Give me something. When are we on the road? And
they've known the schedule for about a week or so. Like at least the past 3 days they've had it. I can promise you that.
At least
might be in draft form, but
yeah, maybe not the final version. Maybe there are a couple of tweaks here and there. Maybe they're still trying to figure out what this Kevin Durant stuff is going to. Clearly the Nets are being, hurt, but as far as national TV goes, by the Kevin Durant drama. But yeah, and Shams knows who is involved with that. Shams knows who has the schedules on all of these teams. There's no way to trace back to anybody. Oh, this is this GM. This is like the Kevin Durant stuff. Though that's very clearly coming from Brooklyn, right?
I don't know. They found a way to do that to Joe Dumars in Detroit a number of years ago, where they gave everyone a different worded memo to see how it was sent out and what leaked, and they traced it Woj to Dumars that way. Do you remember? It was like a nice sting operation they did.
I didn't notice that. I don't remember.
This happens in the Hollywood industry too. They'll give actors different scripts for a movie or something, so that if it leaks, one word is spelled differently or one word's out of place. And so if that script leaks online, they know whose it was. So the NBA sent out 30 different versions of the same memo. So when one leaked, they're like, oh, that's that dude. And it was Joe Dumars leaking stuff to Woj. So whenever he says a Joe Dumars thing, I kind of laugh, because it's very obvious where that source came from. NBA, it was under Stern. You think he liked his stuff being leaked? No way. Dude was God. The stories we hear about him are something else with all of that.
I mean, what an appropriately named person, Stern.
I
Stern.
once wanted to do a comic book that was NBA based called Stern Justice. And it was going to be about his like rise to being the commissioner. And he literally got so mad one time. It was like his origin story of kind of being like a anti-hero villain that he smashed his hands on the ground so much and one of them broke. So he had like literal iron hands that he used to like run the league with.
I love it.
No one can steal that idea if you're listening to the show right now and you're an artist or something.
Copywritten. And so what would Adam Silver be? Lenient boy?
I don't know what he would be now, actually.
Look, the NBA, just the NBA's punishment, the discipline side of the NBA has grown quite soft after Stern. Stern came down hard on teams. You know, at this point, you really, it's funny. He came down hard on what's his name with the Clippers,
Sterling, right in the beginning.
Sterling,
that was like his
right away,
first thing.
boom. And you're like, oh damn, it was appropriate. Now, like some of the stuff that happens, you're like, oh, it's only a 1-game suspension. You're like, what? So.
We were talking about the schedule, but I think that ship has sailed now.
Yeah. Sorry. Derailed.
All right, that's going to do it for the Wednesday episode of Locked On NBA. We can just go off right there. Appreciate y'all listening on Wednesdays. I'm your co-host, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter, and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
And I'm the derailer, John Karalis, at John_Karalis on Twitter. You can find me on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen today and every day. We are the Locked On NBA podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.